Welcome to the Grand Shorts, a part of the Grand Podcast. The Grand. So welcome to the third episode in the Grand Shorts. This first batch of 3 episodes, as mentioned in the previous episodes, I will try to do this once per month. That's the idea, and then have release 3 episodes at a time in a batch that are shorter than you're used to in this long format that I normally have. So they will be between 20 and 30 minutes each of them, but I will release a batch. So if you are craving more information, you can do that. You can binge listen to the Grand, to the short format here. Now, as mentioned in the last episodes, as mentioned in the 2 last episodes, this first batch is about my first years working within the EU R&D funding area as an NTP and head of unit in the Danish Agency for Science, Technology and Innovation. And I was not only an NTP and a head of unit, I was also a program committee member. And this is what I'm going to talk about in this episode, where I will zoom a little bit in on what that is, what the program committees are, and not least how you can use that and how users and beneficiaries can take advantage of that. So let's get on with it. So I sketched it out in 3 parts. First part, I will share the function of the program committees for the European framework programs. Then I will look into the working procedures of it, so you get an idea of how that is. And finally, I will try to sketch out how you can get your voice heard in these things. So first of all, the function of the program committee. So the European Commission and its work with the framework programs. Of course, European Union as a member state organization, you need to have a place where the member states, they have their say on what is included in the different initiatives. It's like this throughout the work that the European Union they does. Of course, the Council plays a big role in this, where the ministers, they meet on a regular basis in relation to European Commission initiatives and where to move on with the overall political agenda of the European Union. But within the specific area of the R&D part, research and development and innovation initiatives, here the European Commission has made a system where the work program parts, so you have the huge work program that covers all socioeconomic areas where the European Commission is supporting with funding, but each of them has divided into parts, broken them down into thematic parts, and those thematic parts, they each have a program committee. And in the program committee, you have the European Commission sitting at the end of the table, literally, and then you have representatives from all of the EU member states in the rest of the room. These committees, they meet on a regular basis in the flow. And I will get back to that, coming to the procedures. But the purpose of the committees naturally are that you have the Commission coming with the initiative. They come forward with what they would like to do with a specific research area, just energy, for instance, the energy area. They would like different funding going towards different specific technologies. But as mentioned, European Union being a member state organization, the member states need to have their say. And this is the function. So this is where the member states, they come in, they see the draft, just like when the European Commission has initiatives on things that the ministers need to see. They also then come for the Council and they go through what the Commission has suggested. So this is a little bit the same in a smaller format. So you have the Commission, they present what they would like to do, and then the member states, they gather and they look through these things, and then they come with suggestions for changes or what they can accept and not accept, and you make negotiations and so on and so forth until you finally have an agreement in the end just like with the council meetings and so on, for the bigger picture from the European Union. So that's the function. And of course, the function is at the heart of what the European Union is. It is a common initiative, so to say, across the continent. So this is where all member states can see themselves and what they would like to do mirrored in what is coming out in the end, that the beneficiaries they can approach from each member state, be it research or industry or SMEs and so on. That's the key function. So actually the program committee, they are decisive fora. So you have all these inputs that come from other places, and then it's here where you decide. It is here where the decision is made. So when you raise your finger, when you are voting and so on in the program committee, which I was doing, when you sit there and you are suggested things, and you have and then you have a vote, then it's you are representing your country on behalf of you're representing a country, and then that's your position, that's your country's position on that specific thing. So that's the function. And of course, it also has the functions from the Commission's point of view. They have a suggestion of what they want, but it's not in the Commission's interest that that the member states, they don't agree to what you decide in the end. So from the European Commission's point of view, it is extremely important that everybody have put their hand on the cooking plate and say, look, this is what we do. Now, let's move on to the working procedures. And here, of course, my experience comes in, and the work I was doing. So what happens in the program committees is that you have, when a work program comes to life, it has certain phases. The European Commission, as mentioned a couple of minutes ago, they have the serving right. So they come with the suggestion of what it should look like. And that is based on a lot of information and fora and platforms and so on, where industry and research and all kinds of stakeholders, they have given their input within all the technology areas you can think of. And then the Commission have gathered these things, they've sorted it, and then said, this is what we would like to have in the work program. At this stage, the first draft comes to the program committee members. And what happened is that you sit out there in the different agencies or ministries as an employee throughout Europe, and you receive this from the Commission in an email. So this draft you receive is something that you sit down and you analyze it, and then you find out what is going to be your position from your country. Now, before I move into that, the principle here of the working procedures is that receive the WP draft, then and after the draft is being forwarded, there's an invitation to a program committee meeting. So you get the draft, then there's a meeting, maybe 2-3 weeks ahead, sometimes a month, something like this. And then each country has the time to go in and prepare their position. So that's the work. This is the flow of work. So you know that there's a meeting date coming up based on the draft that you have. And then, each country, so they prepare their position. How do they do this? So in Denmark, and this is how it is in many countries, you have the authorities, the responsible authorities within research and development, they have made and established reference groups, thematic reference groups. And in these reference groups, I can explain how it was in Denmark. Each reference, I don't remember the number because that's a while ago, but I think there would have been 7, 8, 9 or something like this, covering the most important socioeconomic sectors from the Danish side. So, and this is based on national priorities, right? So the Danish government, they have developed their position on what is the key priorities for us when it comes to the European policies on research and development. So based on that, you would have these reference groups and thematic groups. And in these reference groups, not just step in. I'll get back to that in a second when we come to the getting your voice. But here, these reference groups members were invited. So it was by invitation only, but they would be covering as good as possible the sector that we're talking about, or the thematic area that we're talking about. So you would have from innovation clusters, you would have from the research environments, you would have from the industry, you would have SMEs representatives, NGOs, or whatever areas would make sense within that thematic area. So, and these were being appointed based on their CV, curriculum, what they have been doing within this area. These groups, whenever you would, so back to the working procedure. So when the work program draft comes from the European Commission, this draft is sent to the reference group members, and then there would be scheduled a meeting with the reference group members after a couple of weeks, where they would present their positions or their comments for what was in the draft. Sometimes a meeting was not possible due to time pressure, so they would come back by email with their comments. But most important thing here is that the reference group were the one to secure critical mass, or are the ones to secure critical mass for input for the work programs. So this is a work as a head of unit in such a way. So this was what I did. So my work was to secure that it was sent, secure that getting input from these people and gather them in a format for a policy document with the official Danish position on the work program draft. So that's the internal, so to say, the checking the Danish position, but you would also sometimes need to coordinate with other member states, because as with anything else within the European Union, this is all about alliances and joining with countries with the same strategic interest as your own, to make sure that you're not voted down, or securing that you could get your interests through. It's like this in an international collaboration organization like the European Union. So sometimes you would need to check with the German representatives, or the Polish representatives, or the Dutch representatives, where you knew they would have the same an interest in the same thematic area, and clearing up voting positions when these things would come up in the committee meeting. It's very important, because these things could be vital for strategic interest. For instance, when I was sitting there was a huge focus on wind technology. It was in the beginning of the zeros. No, sorry, it was the end of the zeros. And here it was vital for the Danish government, for the Danish industry and the Danish research within wind technology, to make sure that the technologies that were being put into the work program to be funded would be ambitious enough and would be aligned with where the research sector in Denmark was going, also where the industry was going, and so on and so forth. So here, these things are very important, but you need to make sure that the other countries that had an interest in this were following the line, so that you were, and sometimes you need to coordinate a little bit, and sometimes, of course, disagreement. So you would need to make sure that at least on the main lines you could agree, and then sometimes you don't get everything you want. It's also like this in a collaborative organization like the European Union, right? But here, a lot of coordination work to make sure that interests, this is a bit of interest for representing the interest for your nation's sector. It might sound a little on the high here, but this is what it is. And it was seen as a very important role from the managers that I had, and the organization I was working for there, of course. So at this point, when you reach to the actual program committee meeting, well prepared, you come with your briefcase, so to say, and you sort of have an idea of how things are going. So the meetings follow quite strict, the agenda, welcoming, and then you simply go through. Then the commission comes if there are any specific messages in relation to the procedure of how it going, the development of the work program, so to say, on the overall side. But then you start to go through every single call. And in the beginning, the meetings are not so long as in the end of this cycle. In the beginning, because it's a draft, there's not so much to discuss. And you don't have so many calls, and there's not so much call text yet. So that is more, you're like, okay, this is where it's going, and then so those meetings were shorter. But when you move towards the end of the cycle, in early spring, so to say. This was normally when it was. Then the meeting starts to get quite hairy and long because you run through every single call in the work program, and sometimes calls are quickly gone through, but sometimes you would have a huge disagreement on the angle in the work program, the wording, or where the weight was laying. So this is it's just to let you know, which is also regular listeners of this podcast will know that I mentioned it sometimes, that each word in the call text are indeed, there are no coincidences in the wordings of the text. And so this is, everything is discussed. Everything has been run through thoroughly by all representatives on the member state side and from the commission side. So this is how it is. You go through every call, and eventually the meeting ends with a certain agreement, and the commission then would then come back with the disagreements, right? So the commission will have to get back with a new draft that they have been running through, and sometimes it's not really as you want it, but it's like this. And then the commission also has its own priorities, but it's a negotiation phase. But eventually you reach an agreement, and then the commission will gather input from the meeting. You get there's some communication after the meeting with a resume of the meeting, and then after a month or so, there is a new draft coming, an invitation for a new meeting, and the cycle continues. So that's how it works. Now, I will, in the long format, normal format, I've actually have a guest that I've just been making an agreement with that won't be until spring, but he's a program committee member, so am I used to be. So there I will record an episode on the work in a long format where I will dig a little bit more into this. Now, in the final part, as I promised, I will let you know a little bit on how you can get your voice heard. As mentioned, the reference groups in Denmark was by invitation only. But that doesn't mean that you cannot reach out, and that doesn't mean that you are not being heard if you actually have input. So to give you an example, when I changed position from this job to the next job I had working for the Danish offshore renewable sector in Brussels, I made my own reference group inspired by my work that I had here. I made my own reference group. I was working for a sector, so I gathered people in a reference group-like setting, and I was giving input to. I was not myself sitting in the reference group of energy, the government's official reference group on energy, but people from my reference group were sitting. Some of them were sitting in that group, and the authorities were very happy. Those were my old colleagues. They were very, very happy that I had made an initiative where they could get even more detailed and strong input for the work program, because as a head of unit, you're very busy, do many things. I was in 2 program committees, and I was an NCP for 3 areas. So I had a lot to do. So it was helping whoever would come with input that could be used, that was quality input for this part of the work, but the program committee work was a gift. So nobody, I know, of course, you have different bureaucratic and public administration traditions throughout Europe, but honestly, I would be surprised if you approach your national contact point organization and tell them that you would like to share your point of view on a specific technology for the work programs in the future. I would be surprised if they would say, "Go away, we don't want to hear what you're saying." On the contrary, my best guess is that they will indeed invite you in for a meeting to share what it is you have to say. And this goes for all the way around, guys. So it's from industry, SMEs, R&D, and so on and so forth. Nobody is going to send you home. Might coordinate internally. These are strategic things. So probably if you work in a university research institute, this is something of strategic interest. So you need to coordinate that, of course, with your management, and the same for industry. You don't just call the government without checking with your managers. But the idea is, if you do a good, if you have something to say, then do go and make an effort, because it will be heard and it will be listened to. I will end up here to make sure that it's short, becoming a long format. I hope you had enjoyed this short introduction to the program committee world. I hope you enjoyed the last 2 episodes on the NCP work and an introduction to how I have been working, so you can better understand where I come from. And as mentioned, I'll try to do this once per month. That's the idea. So, and the next batch will be exactly the same approach. I will have an episode on the job I had after this one, on where I worked for the Danish offshore renewable sector in Brussels, and then I will take out 2 areas from my time, 2 subjects covering my time for that, sharing with you about that. I've not decided yet which part it's going to be, but it's probably going to be networking and the lobby approach, but we'll wait with that. Don't forget to check out my website, thegrant.eu, where you will find a lot of podcast episodes at this time, around 100. It's a huge back catalog that you can dig into, divided into categories of research, for coordinators, for proposal preparation, and so on. Check it out. And while you're in there, don't forget to subscribe to my email list. This spells currency in the podcast world, so if you have any sympathy with what I'm doing, please subscribe. Last thing, don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn. This is where the fun happens. This is where the flow is. And this is where you can also connect with me very easily if you want to get on the show, or if you have comments to what I'm doing. For now, thanks for listening to the end. Bye. The Grand